Today at moneytalkviewpoint.org and let someone help you. Well, my special guest for today is Ron Silberstein. Ron is also one of our co-hosts for Money Talk Viewpoint. Ron is a certified public accountant and a certified franchise executive. And I'm going to let Ron tell you all about what he does. Ron, can you give us some insight about you and how you got into the business?
Sure, Chantel, thanks, and happy to be here today. As you said, I'm a CPA and a certified franchise executive. And when I got into franchising, it was through the CPA firm. I had a client who bought a large golf store franchise company, and we were doing his audits. And then after a while, he talked me into leaving my CPA firm and coming in-house with them as CFO and Chief Admin Officer. So that's when I started really learning a lot about franchising and falling in love with franchising. What I do now is I'm still doing some CPA work. I also have a startup franchise company called Bud's Place. We're franchising social cannabis consumption lounges. And I also still do some work with franchisors and franchisees, consulting with them, helping them decide. I've helped people decide whether, to buy a franchise or not. I've helped them negotiate franchise agreements.
I mentioned this, I would imagine there are a lot of people like myself that had no idea of the depth and breadth of the franchise industry. I never even had a concept of all that. And I'm going to ask you a question here. As a potential franchisee, what kind of information do I receive from the franchisor when I'm looking into a specific concept?
Sure. So normally what happens is somebody, either they research franchise concepts on their own, or they work with a consultant that represents a lot of different franchise companies and helps determine which one might be best for them. One of the great things about franchising is that there's a lot of information out there on the franchise concepts that you can find on your own. And then because franchisors are regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, there's some rules and regulations that they have to follow. A major one they have to follow is they have to put together a franchise disclosure document, also known as an FDD. And it's a document that can be intimidating because it's hundreds of pages long, and it contains a lot of information on the franchisor. So the FDD, after speaking with the franchisor and the franchisor determining that the territory you're interested in is available and that you financially qualify for their system and they think you'd be good in their system, normally then what they do is give you the FDD for you to go through. And it's very important for most people when they get the FDD to have professionals that they're working with to help them go through it and understand it. So usually you should have a franchise attorney, so not just an attorney, but somebody who is familiar with franchising and knows franchising and understands FDDs. And then usually you may have an accountant on your team also to help go through the FDD, go through the financial info, and that should also be an accountant or CPA who's familiar with franchising. Because the more familiar the attorney and the CPA are with franchising, the better advice they can give you, both on whether it's an appropriate document or what kind of red flags there might be, or what you should ask related to the FDD and the terms of the contract to try to negotiate things to get a better deal or a deal that works for you. The FDD itself has 23 different items that are all mandated by the Federal Trade Commission. And give you an example of some of the items, and then we can talk about some of the more important ones. Although, in my opinion, every item is important and every word in that FDD is important. I know when being in franchising and writing FDDs with our franchise attorneys is we focused on every word, and every word is in there for a reason. And, whether it says shall or may, or should or could or must, they're all there for a specific reason. The franchisor and their attorney put them in there. So it's important that a franchisee read everything before they sign anything. They also have to have the FDD. A prospect has to have the FDD in their hands for 14 days before they can sign a franchise agreement. So that gives them a couple of weeks to go through it, minimum of a couple of weeks to go through it with their trusted professional advisors to make sure they understand what they're signing and that it works for them, because it's got to work for them. Usually a franchise agreement is tilted somewhat or tilted a lot towards the franchisor and towards protecting the franchisor. Oftentimes, once a franchisee signs the contract and gets involved in that system, the only time after that that they ever look at their contract is if they're having problems, if something's going wrong, or when they get near the end of their franchise term and are trying to decide whether to renew it or not for another term. So the FDD starts out with item 1, which has information on the franchisor, has information about the business, has information about the management team, and has some disclaimers in it. Item 2 talks about business experience of the franchisor management team. So it lists each key person and gives their business background and experience. Item 3 talks about litigation, which is any litigation that the management team members or the franchisor have been involved in the last 5 years. So that's an important section, because if you're looking at that and see that the franchisor is getting sued by vendors or getting sued by other franchisees or is suing franchisees, that may be a red flag. And, so that's item 3. Item 4 is bankruptcy. So it talks about bankruptcy of the business or affiliated businesses or the leadership team. So, so you start out getting information on the business and the people behind the business. And one of the most important things in a franchise system is the leadership team of the franchisor, because you get a good idea of how trustworthy they are, how good of operators they are, because litigation oftentimes is a big red flag if franchisees are suing them or they're suing franchisees. It's an indication that there's problems there. And sometimes those problems can be overcome, or if you negotiate the right kind of contract, they may not become issues that you have to deal with, but it's usually not a good sign when you see that they're involved in litigation. Some of the really important big items in the FDD. Item 5 talks about the initial franchise fee. So it tells you what you have to pay up front. Usually in a franchise system, when you sign the franchise agreement, you pay a franchise fee right at the same time. It's usually not refundable. There's a big range of franchise fees. They can be anywhere from a few $1,000s all the way up to 100,000 on most franchises. I have no idea, frankly, what the franchise fee would be for a professional sports team, or a big hotel or some other really big business, but it's probably more than $100,000. The next item in the FDD, item 6, talks about other fees. So when you're a franchisee, normally you pay a franchise fee up front, and then when you start operating your business, you pay a royalty, which is usually a percentage of sales. It can also be a flat fee. It depends on the franchise systems. You might pay them $1,000 a month, or you might pay them 10% of sales or 7% of sales. It tells you how often they're paid. So it can be paid daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. There can be minimum royalties that you pay. So if it's sales based, but you don't have enough sales to hit the minimum franchise fee, if they have a minimum or royalty, then you might pay $2,500 a month, or the greater of 2,500 a month, or 7% of sales, for example. So there's different types of royalty arrangements. Oftentimes there are also other fees, such as a national advertising fee, or a brand development fee, or a technology fee. Everything's laid out. There's a lot of things you can ask. Buying a franchise could be the biggest single investment somebody makes in their lifetime. Could be the second biggest behind their house, but many of these cost more than somebody's house cost. And it's a big investment. You can make a lot of money, and you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the business concept, with the people behind it, before you sign on the dotted line and commit yourself to being in bed with that franchisor for a long period of time, and maybe putting your financial future or your potential future wealth, on the line with those people, because you're not just doing it all on your own. You're relying on them, and you're relying on them now and to help you get open, and you're relying on them and their business expertise to help you stay profitable in the future, because things change. You can look at McDonald's, Taco Bell, all the food companies, and is their menu the same today as it was 10 years ago? No, they've added things, they've deleted things, they've added breakfast, they've added coffee, the coffee shops have added sandwiches. So you're relying on that management team to lead the way for everybody, and to be able to adapt and make changes as things change over time, because every business and every industry is going to change over time. And if they don't keep up with it, it could affect how you feel about that concept 7 years from now versus now. Everybody's excited about it when they first sign the agreement. They want to hear people telling them what a great decision they made, how great the business is going to be, and they're just raring to go. And then it can be a wake up call when they open the doors, if the customers aren't coming in, or if it costs them way more to get open than what the FTD said it was going to cost them. So there's a lot of trust involved between the franchisee and the franchisor's management team.
Is a prospective franchisee, are they better off with a startup then, or an emerging brand, or with a more mature brand? Mature concept?
Yeah, so that's one of those questions where it's an it depends answer. So with mature brands, so like obviously McDonald's is a pretty mature brand. Subway's a pretty mature brand. Some other sandwich companies and pizza companies are mature. So you've got a good track record with a mature brand. You can be very familiar with them, you can love their products, but they may not have any locations available. There's thousands of McDonald's, thousands of Subways, or the locations they have available for a new one, might be not such a great location, because all the really good locations are already being used by somebody. Flip side of that is, with the mature brand, you could buy an existing one. And then what you're getting into. And obviously, buying an existing McDonald's costs more than starting up a new one, because you're paying them based on their existing sales and profits. So you're going to pay more, but hopefully you've got less risk. There may not be a ton of upside with a mature brand, but you may be pretty much guaranteed to keep making the net income that all the other franchisees of that brand are making, because it's built up its brand name, it's well known, they've got the advertising programs. You should have less risk basically when you're buying a mature brand, but there could be less upside. With an emerging brand or a startup brand, there could be more risk involved. They may not have many units open. My startup has no units open yet. So there's going to be some more risk with a smaller brand, but there could be a lot more upside. You may be able to negotiate a better contract. The mature brands usually do no negotiating on a contract. They hand you the agreement and it's basically sign it or, don't sign it, but we're not changing anything in the agreement. And then emerging brand or startup brand, there's usually some things you can negotiate. Keep in mind, they define emerging brand in franchising as less than 100 units. So, an emerging brand can have 40 or 50 or 60 units that are all doing well and where you don't have much risk, but they could have a lot of good territories still open. Certainly a startup like mine, every territory is open. So somebody could come in, and pick, the best location, the best territory available, and have a lot of upside. We've got more areas open if somebody wanted to do a multi-unit agreement, which many emerging brands would also have. A lot of good territories available, while a mature brand wouldn't have those. Some brands, basically have no territories available in certain states or in many states. And then if you want to get into that brand, you've got to buy somebody out that already has one. So I guess the bottom line is, on an emerging brand, or a startup, you've got to look at that brand and decide that there's so much potential there that the additional risk you may have is worth it. And then you're looking at the management team. What have they done before? Maybe they've built up other brands before and decided, hey, we want to start this one up. Or maybe there's some like home-based franchise systems where they just keep adding new concepts to their model. So they might do roofs, they might add gutters, they might add grout cleaning, they might add lawn maintenance. There's all different kinds of things that they may add to where it's a new concept, but you're looking at the management team and the other things they've done, and decide, what, I can trust these people. They've got a good track record and I have no problem investing with them, because that's really what, buying a franchise is, investing in a business. And whether you need to be the one there all the time running the business, or whether you're the only one in the business, doing it all. You can have an insurance franchise. State Farm is an insurance franchise. There's real estate broker franchises. So it can be where it's a one-person franchise doing all the work, or you have a few employees working with you, but it still takes up a lot of your time. There's other franchises where you just hire, a general manager, or have, I have a client that has a pet services franchise in Arizona, and he has his 25-year-old son running the business. And he's looking at buying some other franchises now where his son's going to run them, and hire a general manager for the other ones. So there's businesses out there where you don't have to be there 24/7, where you don't have to be there much at all, and are really just keeping a tab on things. You've got to be the kind of person that is good with that. that can handle that, and doesn't want to be hands-on 24/7. But there are franchise businesses where you don't have to be too involved, and you can make a lot of money. There's a small number, I think, of franchises out there. One of them, for example, is a food business called Teriyaki Madness, where you sign a franchise agreement with them, pay all the money, and they'll run it for you. So you're basically just getting your share of the profits all the time. There's so many different kinds of franchises that there's something for everybody out there. It really is what it is, and it's just finding the right fit based on your wants and needs and goals. And some people buy franchises because they want to slow down. Some people buy franchises because they want a new challenge. There's a lot of different reasons, and there are franchises out there basically to fit almost anything anybody could want.